Hello, this is the CUDAN Open Lab Seminar on April 4, 2022. And today it's our greatest pleasure to have Sabine Süsstrunk from EPFL. And she will talk about visual computing, facts, fakes, and fiction. Stage is yours.
Thank you, Maximilian. So anyway, again, apologies for this. Well, I guess I have to go figure out what in the world is happening here. Thank you, first of all, Maximilian, very much for the invitation. And what I basically will do is talk about visual computing, and that's kind of something that's in my heart. And I'll introduce myself maybe a little bit more in just a minute. And then facts, fakes, and fiction. Now, you know, one cannot do this topic justice objectively in you know, the 40 minutes that I'm basically having. So I'm just going to choose and present certain topics that, you know, I find important to talk about, and I give you my own personal opinion about this. Interspersed, there's going to be some examples of research in the lab, but also that has been chosen basically to make the point. So, oops. Now, how do I move on? Sorry about that. Okay, so this is how to move on. So first of all, a few words about myself. I'm a professor in the computer science and communication sciences department at EPFL. That's the École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne, which is located on this beautiful Lake Geneva. And there I lead the image and visual representation lab, which basically does research at the intersections of algorithms, human vision, physics. So with the focus on actually not just imaging and image processing or computer vision, but specifically on photographic material. So photographs. So as opposed to maybe be medical imaging or remote sensing, we basically work on photographs. Now, algorithms, in this case, you can go anywhere from signal processing, you know, and image processing, and specifically lately, of course, to machine learning. But more about this later. So the first thing, I have a little task for you. Now you waited long enough to do something, so I'm actually asking you to do something. So I'm going to play this video, and you're going to count how many times the players wearing white pass the ball.
Count how many times the players wearing white pass the ball.
Okay, so what's the correct answer?
9.
9?
15.
15. Okay, is that correct? Okay, anybody else? Well, the correct answer actually was 16.
The video was glitching a little bit. That's
okay, then that's what you missed it. Well, that's true. That'll be fine. So you're very close though. So who of you saw the gorilla? Well, I saw 512. I saw somebody who saw the gorilla. Very good. You probably saw one of those types of videos before. However, so you didn't see it. Well, that's it. You concentrated on counting. However, Mike, you saw the gorilla, but did you see the curtain in the background changing color? It didn't. And then one of the other team is actually leaving. So let's just watch this again.
Count how many times the players wearing white.
Actually, sorry, let me just go.
And watch it again. Here comes the gorilla, and there goes a player, and the curtain is changing from red to gold.
What's the point I wanted to make? Point I wanted to make is we are actually not that great in visual tasks. We are the receiver of most of the photographic information that we're actually creating. But when it comes to us, we are not specifically good in recognition and classification. When we concentrate on something, we do not see something else. And this is the video who actually illustrates this quite clearly. But that brings us to a problem, right? What are we going to do with all those photographs we're actually taking? So this is an estimate of the web, might be off by even an order of magnitude, but who cares? But we are taking probably 1.5 trillion photos in 2022. And next year, it's going to be 1.6 trillion photos. So it's what are we going to do with it? And by the way, why are we taking that many photos? Well, the reason for it, of course, is that each one of us now has multiple cameras. Think about this thing here, right? So you have now one camera up front. You have now two cameras in the back. You have a camera on your tablet, probably even two cameras on your tablet. You have one in your, all the other devices. We have so many cameras everywhere, and we're actually quite often using them. And, I have to admit that most of the time when we're using them, we're actually taking selfies, but we are using them. So we need to actually, maybe before that, another kind of statistics I wanted to show you. This is from earlier this year. At this point in time, we have 5.31 billion people having a camera in their device because they have a mobile phone. They might not have a smartphone, but they probably do have a camera phone. That is the equivalent to 7.91 billion people in the world. And for the more or less 5 billion that actually use the internet, and the 4.6 billion who use the social media. So many of the pictures taken will stay on the phone, but some of them will go to social media. Because if you actually look at social media and its popularity, you can actually see that the first ones like Facebook, YouTube, WhatsApp, Instagram, WeChat, they all are image enabled or even video enabled. So all the images and video we're taking, we have a place to actually distribute them, and people are actually looking at them. But it's a lot of information. And for that, we actually need to have tools and possibilities to organize them, annotate them, do whatever they want to do. And it's not going to be you and me, it's going to be a machine vision system. So let me come to the fact, or at least the first fact I want to talk about. And that is that this artificial intelligence, and with that specifically, I mean deep learning using convolutional neural networks, CNNs, has moved visual computing from a mostly academic discipline to an integral part of a large number of disciplines and activities. And when we talk about visual computing, in this case, I really truly mean computer vision. It also has done more of the creation of imagery. I'll talk about this later, but basically computer vision. Now, computer vision is actually already an old field. So this is Gerald Sussman, who was actually tasked by Mavinsky, who was then the professor of the Artificial Intelligence Lab at MIT. Over the summer, he was a bachelor student, as a summer project, to actually teach a computer, or a camera, what it saw. Now, needless to say, this was an incredible failure. And, for 40 years, more than 40 years, computer vision, we had some successes, we could do certain things, but really that recognition of teaching the computer how we humans see was almost impossible. But now, let me show you another example of what's doable now. This is YOLO. This is a system you only look once and in real time can actually basically locate and annotate objects in a scene. Now, for those of you who actually do know computer vision a little better, you probably know that I used an older version of YOLO. Right now we're up to YOLO version 5 that is even more, can even do much more than what I showed you here. However, the video illustrating YOLO 5 is not as cool as YOLO 2. So what happened in between? What happened more or less about 10 years ago that changed everything? And the 10 years ago, 10 years ago, the first deep learning architecture called Alexnet actually was used on a relatively large ImageNet database. I'll come back exactly to what ImageNet is. Just for now, it is a relatively large set of annotated images. And Alexnet was able, in 2012, to basically reduce the classification error on these ImageNet images by 10%. So we went from 26% error to 16% errors. And subsequently, when you're actually looking, you can see that even subsequently, we were able to reduce the error by another 2 orders of magnitude. So we're down now, it stops at 2017, but 2022 on this database, we have basically 0 error, much less than a human would do, by the way. And that was the first use of deep learning. Now, just for those of you who are not that familiar with computer vision terminology, so what I showed you with YOLO was basically classification and localization. So it's like the upper left hand on this specific image, you see the 3 sheep. So, we localized the sheep and then we classified that. That's basically what the bar and the name would be. Now, a little bit more complicated is basically object detection. That is that you would find each sheep separately. And then next on the step up of complexity would be semantic segmentation, where you basically, every pixel is annotated with its, semantic meaning, so road, sheep, grass. And then the last, even the most complex one is actually instance segmentation. And so here you would have, again, similar to object detection, you would actually detect each sheep as a separate instance of the terminology sheep. So, sorry, I made a mistake. So classification is just annotating the image with a label of sheep. And then localization is actually annotating where the sheep are within the image. Because if you then go to localization being a little bit more difficult than classification. So if you then go to the localization results on the same ImageNet database, you can actually see that the localization error, which was was also reduced by about 10% when Alexnet, this first deep network, came along, and then again reduced up to now by another 2 orders of magnitude. That's primarily due to some other deep learning architectures, but I won't go into these details in this talk. Now, what's the application? And this is the one thing that makes it so interesting. So the applications now are manifold, and it's much beyond academic usage anymore. It's actually insofar much more beyond academic usage anymore that most computer vision researchers do not work in academia, but they work in industries such as Tesla or any kind of self-driving car industry. And by the way, it's interesting that self-driving or that the car industry was an early adopter of this technology. Partly is they have money, right? They can develop something that costs per usage or per car $1,000, and who cares, right? I mean, then you should sell the car $1,000 more. Many other applications, this kind of classification results or localization results, you could not charge more for the product, even though if this is getting better. Another example is out of the lab of one of my colleagues. real-time robotics, right? It's real-time reaction. This is now a robot arm that can actually capture something. So the idea is that you use computer vision and then translate in real time the position of the arm to actually go someplace. That also is done with machine learning. Huge applications, of course, now outside of the photographic realm is in medical. So at this point in time, for mammography, because there are, millions of ground truth images with or without a tumor available, that within these data sets, actually these deep learning based tumor recognition methods perform better than doctors. And then, of course, one of my favorites that probably came last year or 2 years ago is this image of the black hole, which is, of course, also a machine learning based composite of a gazillion measurements taken all over the world. Actually, this image would be like the equivalent if you would just take in one image with a telescope that has, the diameter basically of the lens would have been the diameter of the Earth. And of course, needless to say, we can't build this, but we could use machine learning to put all of this together. So many, many interesting, exciting applications, all the fields that are great. But now let's just take a little bit of a closer look into this deep learning world. So first of all, this is just a very simple toy example of a supervised deep learning model that we're going to use. Supervised means that we have a lot of labeled training images. So images that have a label associated with it that we can then train within a neural network library. Usually do this on GPUs because they are parallelizable and so much faster. And then you get a trained network. And once you have a trained network, you put in an image and hopefully you'll get then the right label, in this case, cat back. So let's first look at these labeled training images. And here I'm going to come back to this ImageNet. So ImageNet is a very, very, very large image database that was basically collected by harvesting images on the web. It's over 14 million links. That doesn't mean that all the links can still be active, but links to images. And these images were chosen based on WordNet. So what happened was that basically WordNet is a big thesaurus, if you will, where you have a definition for each one of the words. And so we have categories or labels, and then based on the definition in WordNet, we actually went out, or we, I mean, I wasn't involved in this. This has been basically one of the, papers, was it 2008 in CVPR, came out of Stanford, basically collected all these images. So let's look at one specific category. So, female, sorry, let me just get rid of this bar frame, female person. Let's first look at the WordNet and then, in other words, the ImageNet definition. So that definition is a person who belongs to the sex that can have babies. Now, needless to say, as a woman, I have a slightly different perspective. I think we're probably could come up with maybe a bit better definition for that. And so if we then start go and look what the ImageNet actually contains, here's an example. Randomly chosen 98 images from ImageNet who belong to the category female or female person. I'm not sure about you, but I look at this and then I'm going like, hey, it's not going to reflect even me at all. Look at my gray hair. I don't think we saw anybody here a gray hair. It even doesn't even necessarily, go very well with the definition. So this is a problem, right? This is a real problem if you think about then running real images into this. And here's an example that was, it's also a few years, just about, 5 years ago. Google had a pre-trained model, something came in, some type of imagery came in that it did not recognize. And then, what happened? It is basically this misclassified this person's friends as gorillas. You probably saw even before on this ImageNet, there was nobody older and nobody with a dark skin color in this set. A network who hasn't seen these images will not say, I have never seen this image before, what should I do? It will just associate the closest label. And that, of course, is a problem. So beware of bias in your data sets. And all of them have biases. It's just in the nature. But there's also in the nature of these data sets, that you will get an answer anyway. It might just be wrong. Needless to say, this specific example here of the gorilla created a huge shitstorm for Google, and it took them a while to get over this. But that's not the only way you can actually get a network to give you the wrong output. This is now a whole research area, which we also kind of have a few works in, about adversarial attacks. So adversarial attacks can be malicious, but can also just be through something, and that is to put some noise or some perturbation into the original image. So here, this is the classic example used earlier. So you have a panda, 57% confidence it is a panda. You just put some noise in it, which is basically visually imperceptible. You get the image to the right, the network tells you it's a given. Here's a similar one, right? You get an image from the data set. If it's clean, it's a washer. You put a little bit of noise in it. Here the epsilon equals 4. That is just a measure of actually showing how much noise. It's a safe, you go down with in confidence from a washer to 22%, and it's a safe for 34%. And then you add a little bit more noise, and then it's certainly a safe for 37% or a loudspeaker. Washer doesn't even exist anymore. Now, again, you can do this maliciously, or you can just have some noise in your system, and then you get these wrong classifications. Now, it doesn't have to be just in the digital world. It can also be in the physical world. So here are basically two examples, which, look like you put, some stickers on a stop sign. I mean, they were digitally created. I should be exact about that. But the one to the left, for example, was not detected as stop sign anymore at all, but it's a speed sign for 45 miles per hour. Now, imagine this to be in your self-driving car, then, we have accidents. So there's two problems with data sets. They're either they can be prone to bias, and they can also be prone to malicious or not malicious attacks on the data set. Now let's look at frameworks. Well, the frameworks, it's basically just a library. It's basically a bunch of code we all use to train our models. Now, nowadays, we have two dominant libraries or frameworks that we're using. One is PyTorch and one is TensorFlow. They're not academics who've developed these things anymore. This is all done by industry. And this is also the other thing that I wanted to mention a little bit. It's kind of like there's a very short list of players that actually control a lot of what we do in this field. And Facebook and Google are two of them. There's going to be a few more. I'll show them to you in a minute. So once we have the data and the framework, we'll train this on a usually GPU accelerated cluster, because what we usually do is we train different iterations over millions of images. It's a lot of computation. And we in academia do not have that computation anymore. So most companies don't have that computation. So we all go to the cloud. And here, these are the top cloud providers. 5 of them are American and 2 of them are Chinese. There is no European cloud provider at all in there. Well, we can think about this what we want, but I think it's a bit of a problem that we in Europe, and I mean all of Europe, Switzerland included, have given a bit of our digital knowledge out of the hand. And of course, you see here Google again, you see Amazon, IBM, Microsoft Azure, and then you have the Alibaba. But talking about these computational resources, this is a really, really, really nice example that came out of a paper in 2019, who compared the energy consumption of training these models to, the consumption of things we know. So, an air travel, one passenger in New York to San Francisco uses, 2,000 more or less CO2 pounds, right? Human life average in 1 year is 11,000. Why the American life is higher, I guess we all know. You have all these kind of numbers. Now compare to a training of one model. This is now natural language processing models. This is not even imaging. So you have a natural language processing pipeline, if you just train it once, it's not that expensive. But if you start tuning and experimenting and whatnot, suddenly it uses 78,000 CO2 pounds. That is, basically almost 7 years of a human average life. And then if you use these last models that came out, these are actually called transformer models. They're really big. And then if you throw on top of it an automatic optimization of the parameters, which is basically what neural architecture search is, it just becomes outrageous. So training these models is very expensive. Now, what the companies will tell you is, we're on places where it's basically we're neutral in climate, so they build, huge data centers somewhere in the Arctic. I don't know anyone in the Antarctic yet, but in the Arctic, and say this is, basically climate neutral. I'm not so sure this is the case, but this is a very, 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 considering, about the climate thing, we should also consider this and actually come up with models that are less, what's the right word I'm looking for? Well, just use less instead of more and more and more. And the last one I want to mention is that is also kind of funny, is this NTFs, now I don't have my notes anymore. I forgot what the NTF, tangible fungible tokens, and N stands for neural tangible tokens. What they are basically is they're an entry in the blockchain where you can now do, basically note when something has been purchased for what. And this is extremely interesting for the art world, because that has been always a problem in digital art, that you never could actually prove who owns what, right? And so this is an image of, this is an image of the artist called People, who had basically 5,000, taken 5,000 images for everyday life and put together this collage. And this was sold at Christie's auction house for about $63 million. That's the third highest price ever paid for an artwork of a living artist. The guy who bought it is basically a, blockchain owner or something like that, who wanted to kind of promote this idea of these fungible tokens, where you can then really enter within a blockchain. He bought it and he has the right to show it. He doesn't even own, the picture. Well, there's nothing to own. It's all a digital picture, right? I mean, there's basically nothing, a few zeros and one, but he does not even own the copyright, to be honest. But he owns the right to show this artwork, and that has been now noted in a blockchain. But blockchains also are extremely gourmand when it comes to, energy, right? We all know that blockchain is it's nothing sustainable either in the long run. And this one, while it does help artists, because now imagine you can have songs, you can have, any digital art, you can basically put a stake within a blockchain and a date and a price, and nobody can erase this. You can resell this for something else, but it is a issue. This one it's a good thing on one hand. It's a bad thing because blockchains are also very, very, resource heavy. So we talked about CNNs or the kind of deep learning architectures that used one convolutional neural network. Now I want to talk about GANs and about fakes. So really quickly, again, for those not that familiar with computer vision, a GAN is a generative adversarial network. That actually means nothing else, that it's a network that has actually in itself two different networks. And one is a generator of images and one is a discriminator. And the way it works is you have a generator who takes some random information, so random noise, and creates something, in this case, a face. Then you basically feed that face, generated face, within a discriminator who was trained on a bunch of real faces. And the discriminator then basically outputs either this is a real face or this is a fake face. And then that information is fed back into the generator, which improves itself, trying always to become better and better and better. So it's also a loop, you know, it's an iterative process until the discriminator actually outputs real instead of fake for the generated fake face. So this is how this works. And so you can do this, of course, not just for faces, but any kind of imagery you want. So this was the first output. And you can probably see, well, it does look like faces, right? But there's, you know, certain kind of things, you know, errors like in the one in the middle where the hair is not quite correct. The eyes, when you see, are a little strange, you know, especially the ears, you know, one kind of works and then it doesn't work. So it was okay. But then that was 2017. And in this world, it just goes so quickly. 2018. This is the output we got. So the top row and the left column are GAN outputs. And then by manipulating basically a little bit in between, you could even interpolate between those. That was 2018. This is 2019. And we also in 2019 have basically come up with a method of now interpolating by two, sorry, this is first the global one. And then, okay. I'm not even sure if you can see this. Okay, so can you see the eyes moving? Apologies. And now the nose, look at the nose moving. So this is the interpolation actually in between two images, but now not the whole image anymore, but just the asemantic part of it. That's now the mouth. I think I might show it to you a bit differently. Okay, this is now a bit better. Here you see the reference and the target image. And now you see just the eyes moving depending on the reference image, or just the nose changing, or just the mouth changing. So we also worked on this more or less around 2019. This is what was doable there. Besides just the whole manipulation of a face, you could manipulate just some semantic objects. Then we took this a little further and then manipulated now the generator such that you did not need a reference image anymore, but by just moving in different direction of the latent space, you could now actually in the top row, as you can see, change the nose, change the mouth in the second row, change the car style, and change the color of the horse in the last one. So these are all kind of doable. And then also the same thing you can do now with churches, horses, whatever you want. And here, just to show you the latest of the GAN architecture, this came out last October. So on the left, you still saw the style GAN 2 that was used. On the right, you see style GAN 3. And you can start seeing, let me just give you the next. You can start seeing how well you can actually interpolate between different views, different genders, different whatnot. As you can see, it's going to be relatively easy to create deep fakes. And here's the last example. Of the style GAN 3. Now, needless to say, style GAN again was not developed by anyone in the academic world. Well, it was developed by some people in Finland who still have some association with the developed world, but actually they all work for NVIDIA. And NVIDIA is the biggest producer of GPUs. And of course, you know, it takes tremendous resources to actually calculate or train these GANs. So of course, the, you know, producer of these GPUs has these enormous resources, can actually make this, and, you know, at the end sells it all to us to try to make us use even more GPUs and so make NVIDIA richer. That's a little nasty to say, you know, when we use them, we actually use the pre-trained ones. So we didn't use that much resources, and it's fun to play with, but it's, again, very expensive. So I already alluded to this. What you can use, of course, this for is just to create fakes. And let me show you this example.
Simply, President Trump is a total and complete dipshit. Now, you see, I would never say these things, at least not in a public address, but someone else would. Someone like Jordan Peele.
Okay, so this is a classic deepfake, and it's already, you know, dates for about 2 years ago. So you've probably seen this one. There are some more serious deepfakes that have been out there just lately, also within the president of the Ukraine. Thank God it disappeared relatively quickly. So I'm using this old one. If it was already that good 2 years ago, you can imagine how good they can be made today. And one of the things is also, it's not, you know, tools are here. And it's, in this case, it's not just the image or the mouse that moved, it's also the sound, right? I mean, you can make deep fakes also about voices. You can make more or less today, say anything to everyone. And that's not going to, you know, it's not going to help, right? We are currently, you know, the consumer of lots of not, you know, very troublesome information, and most of them probably will be for real, but some of them will be fake. And who's going to make the difference? And for society, it's becoming fake, you know, news is already a problem, but then visual deep fake news is even worse of a problem. Okay, I'm going to skip this one. There was actually a trusted media challenge which we participated in Singapore, where, you know, basically had to detect deep fakes, and we actually did relatively well. But let me just skip to this one. So talking about now a deep fake application that was maybe a little, you know, it's a bit less serious than the one I just showed you, but I personally find it very, very creepy. So this is now MyHeritage is a company who you could upload photos, and they basically, of your ancestors or whoever you want, and they basically animate the photos. And, you know, so the left is the real image and the right is the animated photo. And they're basically now, of course, hallucinating all the different poses of the head and how this person looked like. But the idea is that you should be able to see how your ancestor really looked like. Now, keep in mind, this is just based on one photo, so this pure hallucination. I mean, I personally find these totally freaky, but, you know, each one, whatever they want. So this is actually already available today. But then again, you know, if you can do this with a single photo, can imagine what you can do with a video. Now, our work again from before, one of the things that is still not totally working well is the GAN inversion. So the semantic editing that we've seen, that I've showed you before, now on a still image. Video is, you know, because you have movement, you can actually be not as precise, but with still image, you need to be precise. The one thing that does not work well yet is GAN inversion. So we have the GAN image on the original to the left and the inverted image to the right. Now the top row might actually look, the person looks, you know, maybe, you know, maybe you recognize that top person, but then when the inverted image, when you look at that, it's not that great, right? I mean, the glasses are not, and then also the facial structure. Middle person, you don't know. The bottom person, you don't know either. So you could say, yeah, well, maybe, but it's not, if you look closely, it's not yet correct. But once you actually manage to do this inversion, what you then can do is you can semantically, you know, change the hair, the eyes, and put lipstick on. All this then is possible. So what's still missing, we can, what's here on the right-hand side, we can do this with generated faces who look real to us and do all these manipulations. We cannot yet do it with real faces that well because the scan inversion is not yet functioning, but that's a matter of time. So in a couple of years, this is going to be resolved. Okay, now about fakes, now about fiction. Now about fiction, I'm going to keep it short because we do run out of time considering how long we've been. I'm not going to tell you what is now correct or fiction. I mean, I've talked enough about deep learning, so I'm just going to tell you what we've doing, and that's an ex-PhD student of mine. We actually do use now this artificial intelligence deep learning for the film industry. And one of the things about the film industry is you have so many decisions to make, right? I mean, you have about the script, about the actors, about the filming, who's, you know, which audiences, which theaters, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we actually produced a, you know, platform, a SaaS platform that we can actually analyze movie script with the video input and tell, actually, you know, make some prediction about the revenue, but also give kind of insights of what kind of actors were in similar movies, et cetera, et cetera. Now, one of the things to remember is that films, especially series, are quite prescripted, right? So what we're building here is basically a platform for independent producers. Netflix and Amazon have that platform already. But what we can actually do is we can assign, based on script and film data, basically the genre of a movie. So it's basically kind of the recipe. So, you know, if we look at this, we can go through the script and basically say, well, is it, you know, is it action? Is it comedy? Is it crime? And so the genre recipe changes, and you see back there. And then you can do the same thing, of course, also for the, you know, for the film in itself or the video in itself. And the genome, we can also predict the genome of a script, and the genome of a script is basically how people, the keywords that people use to describe a film. And, you know, this is an example for Superwomen. This is an example for Roma. And we all do base this because are learning on a platform that we built called Sophie TV, which is a platform for short filmmakers. Short filmmaking has basically taken off lately because the camera to actually make a short film is not that expensive anymore. Now you can buy a single reflex camera for 2,000 to 3,000 that, you know, allows you to take 30-second film clips at 4K resolution. So the short filmmaking, I don't want to say industry because most of them are amateurs, but they create very good short films and they're exploding, and they have no platform except for YouTube and giving it for free to actually, you know, make some money. And we provide them with some money-making possibilities because Sophie TV is not for free. And when we, you know, we give back some money to the authors of or the producers of the film, if somebody watches the film, but we also license Sophie TV to TV channels. And if the movie is shown there, the producers get some film back. And then we also have an Ushi Film Awards just for fun. Ushi is the little village next to Lausanne on the board of Lake Geneva. Okay, so I think that covered a little bit what I had wanted to cover. So thank you very much for your attention. And I really apologize for the snafu with the presentation. I hope it was still kind of usable and not too painful to watch it like this.
Thank you very much. Zoom applause.
Okay.
So yeah, thank you very much. Okay. So yes, are there questions from the audience? Yes, there's Viune Zimaitite, who is herself a creative industries researcher.
Yes, can you hear me well? Sorry?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay? Ah, okay. Yeah. Thank you. I had problems with microphone today. Yes, so thank you very much for a very exciting and broad talk. I think you covered almost all of the areas that we work with here at CUDAN, from computer vision to film and script analysis. I think that's just fascinating, the breadth of your work. I myself, I work mostly with the film industry, currently specifically looking at public value creation through participation in film festivals. And I actually heard about the last project you described, the Largo AI, from a while ago. The script part that you described here was very interesting, but from what I was reading was that it also offered a sort of a guidance tool for, let's say, producers who are just about to make a film. And let's say they're choosing actors and they're choosing where to push the film to which countries, how many screens, and so on. And I was just thinking if you have also worked with that part of the project and perhaps could talk a bit more about that assistance tool, especially in terms of what sort of outcomes filmmakers can select as important to them. Because from at least reading, I understood that, let's say, filmmakers can aim for specific box office, but because we currently work with festival participation, I was just wondering if you also explore that avenue of sort of good critical acclaim that a film may aim to receive using the tool. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. So Largo is the startup of one of my ex-PhD students. So he's in there. I'm still somewhat of a scientific advisor, but I will not be able to give you all the details. So one of the things is, yes, I mean, we're improving it all the time. So it is actually meant for being a production tool. And what it does is, I mean, it's exactly the same thing I said before. We train it on a database. And so it can predict of things that have, you know, of similar films, what type of actors were successful there. So one of the things to know, it's not a creative tool, right? It basically is just a tool that helps you saying, okay, you know, you have that type of script. These type of actors were in similar scripts before, right? This type of film did in that country, that box office thing well. So that's exactly what we do. So we basically, it's a pure machine learning. You know, of course, we call it artificial intelligence because everybody calls it artificial intelligence, but a pure machine learning tool of saying, this is what happened. Because the creativity then afterwards is, as a producer, to say, I want to break that mold. I want to do something different. So this is what one needs to know. Plus, our accuracy is not going to be 100%, right? It just cannot be, right? There's no 100% accuracy. You know, we're claiming, and that's mostly true, about an 80% accuracy. So that we're saying, okay, this is 80%. Now, we have not done. Well, let me put it this way: we have not done it for films, the critical acclaim. We have done it for advertising. So we have actually now a thing, because that's where we have the data to learn. We haven't done it for films. It might be something that we could look into, that we learn which type of film did well in which type of festival. We've actually done it for advertising, because there we have a data set of advertising that were, you know, deemed worthy enough of awards. And so with advertising, we have that category of awards worthiness. With films, we do not. We don't have the critical acclaim kind of thing. But it's all, you know, there's no, if you will, magic behind it. It's all data that we have that we can learn. And so it's exactly that. We're basically saying, you know, we're analyzing a script. We're saying that script is similar to script X, Y, and Z. Now, if you don't want to have that, then you can change the script. Or we can also say, you know, in that part of the script, you know, the comedy is stronger than action or whatnot. And then all more in analysis that you can then afterwards change it. And, you know, same, of course, now we're using video and, you know, script data to basically strengthen prediction. Same with the, you know, the genome. The genome is basically how people will talk about your film, right? So this is, and so again, if this is not what you want, then you must change something. Same thing with the actors. You want a young actor, well, these are the actors who were in similar kind of films. You want something else? Well, then choose the opposite. I mean, so this is all the things to actually look at. And it's one, if you will, it's a product where one machine learning result after the other is entered. Now we also have, well, for example, age, and then one of the newer ones we have is putting the age in there. So for which age group would that be a good thing? Did that answer your question more or less? Oh, okay.
Tasvir Ahmad.
Yeah. Hello, hi. Sabine, it was
Hi.
really very nice talk. Can you hear me?
Thank you. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. My background is basically computer science and especially in computer vision. So I have two questions. And the first question is related to, you put a one slide where there was emission of carbon dioxide and while traveling, while training a transformer model and something like this. So I just want to ask that we need such models to train, and we have to consume the energy or carbon dioxide emission, because we can't do like this that we can travel by walk and save the carbon dioxide or energy while not traveling by the plane or something like this. I want your take on it. And the second question is that you talked about the GAN models, and I am really actually thinking on it and using in my work of the artwork analysis and this. And but in that GAN, you talk about inverted GAN. I want to ask about what's that inverted GAN, because I have not heard this the inverted GAN. I have heard about the other versions of it and read good papers on it, but I am not familiar. Just you can tell in one liner or something like this. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. You're welcome. So the first thing is, I mean, I fully agree with you. The current deep learning model, they're not sustainable, because it's just not possible. Because now what you could say is, and what many people do, is they say, well, we don't have, you know, we don't always have to train it. We can use this stuff by using a pre-trained model that Google or Microsoft or Amazon or Facebook gives us, right? The problem with that is you don't know what it's trained for, right? And then you run into the problem of the data set, or what I wanted to allude to when I talked about the data set. Well, maybe you have to retrain it on a data set or something like that, because a pre-trained model, you actually, you know, if you use a pre-trained model, you don't have the problem with the carbon emission as much, but you don't know what it's trained for. And the whole thing, I mean, I was so against using them in the beginning, because it is such against my soul as a researcher, want to understand everything, using a model and just throwing a problem at it and then train. And then when it converges to something, and if it's a little better than the one before, it's publishable. It is just no fun. But we still do not understand. I mean, we just know that they perform extremely well, but if you don't understand why they perform extremely well, and unfortunately, the deeper you make them, that means even more and more and more layer, and to a certain point, the wider you also make them, the better they perform. And I mean, I think we should all put our still very considerable intellectual capacity for all the people now working at you know, NVIDIA and Google and Facebook and Microsoft, trying to figure out how can we make, you know, what we need to do to make this, you know, to get systems who perform just as well, but are, you know, CO2 compatible. Because yeah, that's the thing, you know, I mean, what's the point of not taking a plane to the United States while in the background you're training your model for 3 months you know, on 100 GPUs, right? Then you're just killed every kind of point. And I think that we need to talk about this. I mean, this is not something that will, and the idea also, oh, this is climate neutral just because my calculation is done in Iceland. Really? No, I mean, so anyway, we can go with this. So the other one is the GANs. So GAN inversion is basically a technique to take a regular output image and convert it into a latent space that the GAN basically uses to output. Now, so what you have in what, you know, the generation itself, remember you take basically a vector of random data, and then at each layer of the generator, you know, you add some noise and you do some manipulation. And then you're you know, you get into the next layer, you're actually, you know, upsampling this information, add some more random information in there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Within each one of these layers, you have latent space directions, which you use to semantically modify the image. And it's been proven, several papers already showed you in the very low level layers where the resolution is very coarse. It's more general things like gender and orientation of the face. And then you go in the mid-level, that's where the semantic things like nose, eyes and on the highest level, it's more like background and color information. To take a real image and then also make these fine manipulations like you do in the GAN, you need to be able to actually convert this in such a latent space pyramid to do the same kind of manipulation. And that's what GAN inversion is. And that is what is not working that well yet. And that's the example I showed you. So there's a couple, you know, honestly, I don't know how many papers on GAN inversion right now are. When we did that one, I showed you, we used a method out of Israel, E4E it's called. At that point, there was like 2 or 3 papers on it. There's probably more, and the quality is also probably better. But that is kind of the gist what GAN inversion is supposed to do.
Yeah, it's new topic. I will try to find on it. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Mike Tom.
Yes, actually, by interesting coincidence, 2 of my 3 questions were already asked. That's weird. Thank you very much, and it was most illuminating, especially about this GAN inversion. It is well, it was a little bit unclear at the beginning, and now I think it's quite clear. Thank you very much. So essentially, I have one more sort of judgmental question left. Maybe you can speak. Maybe you can say something and speculate a little bit on what we can actually do to solve this problem of deep fakes, which you were talking about.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's, you know, it's education. Maybe we're already too late, unfortunately, right? I mean, I find it really interesting when you take, you know, let's assume the pandemic, right? Start off with the pandemic and how many people we basically lost in a social media black hole who questions everything from, you know, the pandemic doesn't even exist, you know, this comes out of a lab, if everything exists, this is, you know, Bill Gates puts little 5G chips in yourself when you get vaccinated, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? And you're finding these people, you know, be in this bubble and basically cannot break out of it. And I think this is where we need to be extremely careful, because once they're in these kind of bubbles, then they will believe any fake that belongs to their worldview. And once they're in that bubble, we're not going to get them out of it. I mean, there was an extremely sad case just a couple of weeks ago where a family in Montreux is down the lake from us, basically jumped off a balcony because their son was homeschooled, and and actually the authorities wanted to know what's going on. They knocked at the door. Next thing they knew, the whole family went over the balcony, because and going backwards, that they know he was in these social media, kind of bubbles of conspiracy theory. By the way, these are now the same people who think that the Ukrainian war doesn't exist, right? I mean, it's all, once you're in there, not even showing them, not even proving their deep fakes will actually help them. And so this is where I know I'm not giving you a very, positive view on this, but I think we have to educate, and we have to change. I mean, starting in the school, early age, deepfake can exist. Deepfakes can be very good, and they're going to be soon undistinguishable. If that once the Ghan version works, you can make me say anything you want, right? And it's going to be no problem. And so,
but that particular thing doesn't solve the problem, because it is exactly. What is happening in Russia now, because they're saying that all these videos of bombed Ukrainian cities are essentially deep fakes.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly.
They know that deep fakes are possible, and after that, they only believe what they want to.
But that's exactly it. And so this is what I'm saying: education, get the kids early, because if we do not get them early, we lose them. And once they're in that rabbit hole, I mean, I'm kind of comparing this like with the old sects, right? Where somebody believed some kind of messiah and ran after that thing. I mean, they're just brainwashed. And I don't know, I really have no, except for saying, there's no hidden information anymore. You cannot have a closed WhatsApp or Telegram group anymore or something. I mean, I don't know. I really don't know where to get that, but it's a social problem. It's more than just a technology problem. Yeah, we can build the tools. I mean, the deepfake detection, we weren't first, but we were almost first. I cannot officially tell you what, because the results come out end of April, but we can do, we know how to create deepfakes. So we also want to be able to detect deepfakes, right? So we want to give those tools available to everybody, but that's just technology. That's not belief.
So,
and getting that is such a much bigger problem. Yeah.
I don't know, maybe Mara can chip in for a second. I was asked last week, when this fake news video came up of Zelensky, to comment to the Estonian news. And I did so from the perspective of an art historian, because fundamentally, the threat that you put out here is all this stuff is getting so realistic that people don't see a difference anymore. Which, historically speaking, we have seen twice, once at the Pergamon altar, 180 AD, and once around 1500, when people were good enough painting stuff painting sculptures that they basically looked real in Baroque times. And so you can make all sorts of stuff. Now, how do you actually sort of like get to some truth? And what I find really interesting was the answer of Zelensky. So he walked out the door with a cell phone in front of some shrubbery with lots of different noises, like super hard to fake, like street noise and wind and like everything, and filmed himself and was like, what was doing this like on purpose. So he created this kind of symphony of stuff. Like, I mean, if you're capable of modeling this in 3D, what he did was just like shaking his cell phone in front of himself and the sound. You will, that's basically the NeurIPS challenge the next 5 years to do that. But then there is this other aspect, which I think we sort of like leave out, which is trust. So there's this communication that's necessary, and that's sort of like is the bubble part, right? Where, and again, there we have plenty of experience over millennia, which is cults and sects and, sort of like cutting people off, like what Putin now successfully does with all of Russia. There's this kind of thing, like how do we create these off-ramps and so on? How can we create a communication infrastructure that is like a sort of like, where you can trust the source of information. And that means your neighbor. You also ask your neighbor. Like that is what's cut off. Like neighbors don't trust each other anymore. I lived in a neighborhood where everybody voted for Trump. And it was depressing. I knew what was coming in 2016 because the people around me were already there. And so that is, I think, the trust issue and the realization that no image can ever be real and never has been. I think that's something which we need to sort of like bring back into the discussion. But I somehow have the feeling that we're stuck in the old sort of dichotomy where there is the computer people over here who are the experts in like realness. And then on the other hand, there is society, which now increasingly we all assume they're all living in a filter bubble, which may not be true. And so that is, so how do we make that connection?
Well, that's a very good question. And actually, it's not being done because generally or traditionally, trust in information was the traditional media, right? Either public or private, your newspapers, public television, public radio. Look around you, even in Europe. I mean, US, we're not even talking about it anymore because they haven't had this in years, right? But look in Europe, right? And in Europe, it's, public media is under so much pressure. People saying, well, we don't need it anymore. I have the internet, right? And so it's the people themselves who do not believe that we need trustworthy, information, because they think, and this is where it just becomes, hallucinated, because they think what they get actually on the web is trustworthy. And this is when I went back and said, education, education, education. We just need to teach people, about provenance, about trust, about, real information. And you're correct, they're not there. And here I duly blame, okay, maybe you want to cut off the recording at that point in time. I duly blame the big companies, right? I mean, Facebook's not interested in we'll correct some of the information if it's true, but they're not really interested in this because they're not responsible, right? And so, okay, don't get me started on this, but it's the same thing with all the other big tech companies, right? Facebook is the worst in this, of course, because they control Instagram, they control Facebook, they control WhatsApp. They're not making money by, making sure that the information published is trustworthy. And so, and I think one of the biggest problem, and here, and this goes for all of it, we need to make sure that, at least in every country, I mean, go a little south from you, right? To the country who just elected a new president and look what the media, there looks like. I mean, he basically controls public television. Then it doesn't become public anymore. And that pressure is everywhere, right? In Switzerland, we still have a relatively strong public television, but almost all newspapers are controlled by families, right? So one family controls one publisher, which publishes X newspapers. And I'm not saying they're doing a bad job on purpose, but that's not independent either. Look at Germany. Germany has a huge pressure on their public TV.
It's true.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, I'm a relatively optimistic person, just in case you don't know that. But there, I really see a danger, right? And I see a danger, and I agree with you totally. It hasn't been recognized yet as a danger.
I would love to discuss this further. Let's spread out the bouquet of questions, though. Mark on it.
Thank you for the nice presentation. I have, some comments and some questions. You said about the big models. Yeah, I'm agree that every time like they're doing big models, and I am an artist. I'm a practicing artist. I do art. I'm doing my PhD in the Baltic Film and Media and Art School here in Tallinn University. I'm doing practice-based PhD, and I'm working with all these many things that you mentioned today. And I think that the models, they're basically they're hard to train, hard to touch. I do believe that many models, when they're released, they're not even touched anymore by the researchers. I mean, I know in fact because I did an art project with Dialogue GPT by Microsoft. And I was in contact with them because I was doing some modifications, and I wanted to let you let them know that what I was doing, and they were not interested anymore because they're working in the new model. To release the new model and to make the publishing, and I guess there is some section in Microsoft that they look everything that the output of research, what can be monetized and so on, but they're not the researchers itself. Like means the researchers, they just move to the next, and I just was starting to do when they publish, but then I continue, and then they were not responding too much after. And this I can connect to the funding that you were saying. I do believe that Europe had go out of the wagon of providing good salaries to, for example, myself, PhD students and researchers, decent salaries for example, sustain a family. Like I'm 40, that people don't go to the industry. I had seen in my Twitter, I see the AI and so on, professors going out to the academia and going to the industry because they provide better salaries and so on, and probably not even the stress of these like temporary jobs of 1 year, 2 years funding, and then uncertainty, and spending half of the time doing applications. That's absurd. It's absurd. And I think that Europe has created a system that is deeply toxic in a way, of like having 2 temporality jobs and a lot of bureaucracy to meet, and yeah, this is not normal. And the industry has funding. Means the people go to the industry where they have better conditions of work life as a researchers, and this we should tackle, because like we can blame the industry, but the problem is also in the public sector, that is not it's not well done. Like a 40 years old like me, being PhD and some €1,000 of salary, this is not sustainable for sustaining a family. And I know it's normal in Europe, like the UK something like thousand something pounds a year. I don't know in Switzerland. I know in the Nordic, in some countries there are 2,000 something. But this is like why something like me, a computer science, going to the industry, their figure will be much bigger, because a graduate going to the industry of AI, it can get 200,000 as a starting salary.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me just comment on this, because I violently agree with you. But the thing is, right, exactly. But the thing is, it's again, it comes down to politics, right? Politics need to realize,
of course.
How important, and you know, the UK, they made one mistake, and they're going to pay for the rest of their lives on it. They allowed basically, or they asked people to start paying for their education, and that's the end of it, right? Education needs to be for free, because that, I mean, at the end, you're talking about the future of your country, right? I mean, or let's put it this way, the future of our planet. At the end, you know, we need to have education for free, and everybody needs to.
One after the other. Okay. No.
And I had a question more than a comment now, and is that I see some of your projects are very kind of generating things, and being myself like an artist. Like, do you have in your team, or are you working with artists or collaborating with artists that they do research, like basically someone like me?
Well, on and off. Now currently, so we're generating things. So let me put it this way. I have one PhD student right now who's a computer scientist who wants to be an artist, but he's not an artist yet, right? Exactly. So you know that this is different. We have them in and out. So currently I have nobody, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we won't get somebody back in. So we have, you know, visiting visiting position. We had once the previous work, the one with the semantic meaning, we had that PhD student working with an artist. We have now it's called EPFL Pavillon. We have a kind of a museum and an artist in residency program. And we worked on that, but at that point in time, to be honest, the personality between the two crashed, right? As you know, every good kind of collaboration needs the personality of the people to mix, and that one did not. So unfortunately, nothing good came out of it, even though it could have done. But yes, we have, not currently, yeah.
This of editing, actually, by the way, there is a very good article that David Rockeby, that is an artist that also has a lab in Toronto University. I was in the session in Neurips, not this year, the year before, about latent editing for moving the face and so on, because his lab is focusing performative use of AI. And especially with the focus in theater, and yeah, they published a paper like similar. I don't know, I didn't look your paper yet, but I will.
Yeah, exactly. We're not the only ones. There's, you know, quite a few people who work exactly in this space. It's almost,
but he's an artist, means that's why I was saying, because actually he runs like a lab with an artist and scientist, like in kind of artistic research from publishing also.
Okay.
May I extend the question, which I think we are in a very interesting point. So Sabine, you just mentioned that EPFL has this art museum, which is sort of like going like a spine through the center of the campus, actually touching this thing that looks like Swiss cheese, which is the Rolex library. So bringing together arts and sciences and whatever residue sort of like book culture is there. And then at the other hand, intellectually, you also bring together, on the one hand, machine learning, but also you have headed the Digital Humanities Initiative, which is a bridge to the university and stuff like that. So we're here, this Cultural Data Analytics Lab / group, we're also like between the Baltic Film and Media School, the School of Humanities, and the School of Digital Technology. It's obviously, it's much smaller university, but we're in a similar situation in that sense. And EPFL is really a success story, at least seen from outside, because you're consistently under the top 5 ranked universities under 50. And so how is it? How do you live that? And how does, you know, how much time a week do you spend machine learning? How much do you do interaction with humanities? And how much is there beyond the vernissage of like some output is walking across the art gallery from the train station every day? What effect?
Okay, that's a very good question. So again, the only thing I can tell you is, to successfully navigate all this, one has to learn a bit from the other side. But the learning from the other side is easiest done by having, and here we come back to this person of trust, right? We have some, you know, a trustworthy relationship, and that can be done with whatever. But I can tell you this, right? There's at least one half of the campus who has zero interest. And by the way, at the campus here at EPFL, which is a technology school at the base, and the University of Lausanne, and on each one, there's at least half who have, but zero interest. I mean, zero, absolutely none, in anything that's collaborative with anybody outside of their narrow field. That's at the other side of academia, right? You have the kind of like, okay, sorry for the German word, but the Fachidioten, right? Who just basically see one of these things. And this is the same thing, by the way, in industry, right? I mean, that's what you experience with the Microsoft people, right? It's just kind of like, this is what I need to go, any kind of collaboration, you know. Luckily, it's only half. The other ones do in more active versus passive ways, right? These are the ones you can actually go reach, and you could say, well, this, wouldn't it be cool if? And for some, you know, they open up maybe a little bit, but then you do find some who really are interested in working together. And I think all this needs to, you know, we who see the, you know, none of you would be sitting there if you would not see the benefit of having actually kind of a bigger view on a topic or on the world. And I think it's just absolutely crucial if we want to solve, you know, the problems that are coming to us, like the one we just talked about, right? I mean, you cannot just, you know, it's not just, deepfakes is not just a technology problem, it's a societal problem. It's a historical, has a historical angle, it has a social science angle. And if we want to, if we want to solve this, we all need to work together. But if to be able to work together, we need to understand each other a little bit. And let me give you an example, right? I mean, I'm an engineer at heart. And for an engineer, if you're saying, well, I've solved my problem for 92%, I'm going like, it's solved, right? If you say 96.5%, I'm going like, I'm going to get rich, right? I mean, you're not going to get any better because we do not ever get 100%. You go to the humanities, and then they tell you, well, you're only 96.5% sure. That means 3.5% is not correct. Well, I can't use this, right? So this kind of like idea of percentages, you know, of 95% trust, that just doesn't exist in many of the humanities field. It is either like this or it is not like this, right? It's much more binary. And even understanding, you know, for them to understand me and me to understand them took a while, right? And so this is what I'm saying. So this is a long answer to your question. I spend a lot of time talking to other people. So I don't do machine learning anymore. It's my PhD students who do machine learning anymore. I also spend a lot of time talking to them, right? I learn through them doing this. But then the whole thing of the culture, the digital humanities, where we want to go. But in my sense, it really is truly because I absolutely strongly believe that the challenges of our future, of our presence in the future, can only be, they're huge challenges, and they can only be solved by, teams that work together over different fields. But you only get those teams together and get them to be effective by talking to people. Because again, what you do then is create trust, and with trust comes also creativity, right? I mean, think about your collaborations, you were never creative anytime if you did not trust your collaborator, right? It just doesn't happen, right? And so it takes time and it takes investment, and sometimes you do not have a publication or something tangible at the end, but in the long run, it makes it simpler. And yes, here I have to say, it's easier for me, Mar, because I'm a full professor, right? I don't have to worry about my, a limited time contract. This is why I truly believe this is also a problem. Got that more or less answer your question, McLean?
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
That is also there's a difference between PhD students in Switzerland, PhD students not in Switzerland, and full professors in Switzerland and professors somewhere else.
That's true too. But the thing is, Switzerland pays its due. It's like almost 4% GDP goes into education. And don't believe that we don't have the right-wing party who try to actually chop that budget up. But if nothing else, Switzerland has zero natural resources, absolutely none. So if it wouldn't be for the brain power and the, the inventions, and it's true, Switzerland is one of the highest even patent outputs, we'd be nowhere, right? And what people tend to forget, up to industrialization, the beginning of industrialization, Switzerland was nowhere. Nobody wanted Switzerland, right? I mean, otherwise, neither Germany, France, or Italy would have left that little island in between survive if they would have seen any kind of benefit of, of having it. But it was just mountains with grass on it and a few farmers with a couple cows. And that was Switzerland, right? And this is why Switzerland still exists. It's basically no natural resources, no interest of anything. And insofar you're lucky that somebody in Switzerland has realized that, well, and then came the banks, but we'll forget about the banks for now. That was then not so. That was a relatively traumatic history of Switzerland. Mm-hmm.
Mike.
But politically, we have seen that the brain power of is incredibly important. Yeah.
First of all, I'm sorry for interrupting you before, but I still want to make this point that actually after the tuition fees were introduced in the United Kingdom, there was a huge increase in the number of university students, and especially among the university students, from low-income families. So I'm not very sure that you are right when criticizing this policy, exactly from the point of view of giving people access to education.
Giving people access to education is crucial. I absolutely believe so. But here in Switzerland, if you have it's an interesting kind of thing, though. I mean, social selectivity in Switzerland does exist. Right now, well, I'm going to tell you everybody has the same chance, but actually that's not true. Here, when you have a matura, which is basically a high school baccalaureate, you can go to every university and study anything you want. And it costs you about 800 francs a semester, which is, think how expensive Switzerland is, and it's actually nothing. The problem now, if you do not get this mature, and it's only about 30% of the Swiss students do it, you do an apprenticeship. And this is actually the one key also to the Swiss success, is this idea of an apprenticeship, because you then do an apprenticeship of 3, 4, 5 years, and and you're getting paid during this apprenticeship. And so many people of lower income actually do this apprenticeship. And then you have a federal diploma. And with this federal diploma, you can get back, you can go to Institute of Higher Education, and through that, you can get back into the university level. So you have two different ways, a more practical and a more thing, but you can, doesn't matter what you choose at 16, you can still end up with a PhD. And the strength to a certain point is not even necessarily our universities, it is because we have that dual way to get someplace. And even if you do not do the more theoretical studies, even if you're more applied, but then later on decide to go back to university, there's a chance you can do that. And also once you get out of school, you either have an open path directly to the university, or you have a profession with a federally recognized diploma, and you can become an electrician anywhere and open up your own business, and you have that kind of degree. So paradoxically, it's actually not the university, it's the other one around it that actually strengthen our system. But your point, very well taken, right? I mean, once they open it up, they had more money in the system. That meant more students could come. And that, of course, is fair. My point was more, it shouldn't have been open up anyway. And,
but no British government, neither Labour nor Conservative.
Yeah, exactly. Right, exactly.
Yes, probably.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
That it might be a good idea, but it was.
Mm-hmm. It's not going to happen, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thatcher would have not gone for it, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Let's spend another 15 minutes on machine learning. Mar.
One comment. Yeah. This system of dual system I had saw in Austria, and it worked really well. Actually, you can go to work and then learn some basically specialization, and then come back to university, and then you actually get a salary during your bachelor because you had worked before. And then I think it's very good because you are doing, I don't know, an engineering, but you had been in a company that know how to solder, know how to work the materials, and you are not like only pen and paper, someone that doesn't know anything. And then you go out of, I don't know, mechanical engineering, and you can build something very big because you understand from the bottom to the up to the theory. And I do believe that this system is very good of having the dual. Anyway, I had we didn't mention before about this attention. I think that the big models are something that I hope that one day they reach the limit. And I had seen already some papers about that. It's like the new trend of transformers, that all what you need is attention. And yeah, that basically I hope that they will be more aimed towards these attention models, that they can do well with very much little data, and actually that's also with the diffusion models. I mean, they're not little, but they can retrain without training the whole thing with millions of parameters. It's kind of happening that they actually win in the Gans already. Yeah, I mean, maybe had you worked now recently with this kind of topic
Yes,
of
yeah.
attention in the models?
Yes, yeah. We actually have a CVPR paper coming up now that we will have use attention within a kind of a transformer model. Yes, we have used attention. It is actually very promising, and you know, very useful. So, you know, we got a substantial. I mean, it wasn't per se, if you will. So what we did, it was a multitask thing. So we basically trained one transformer, but to do multiple tasks. And so it's basically done depth perception. What was it? You know, segmentation, depth. Now I'm blanking. So
in images, that model.
Yes, in images.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a transform model for images. So anyway, the idea is if you illumination, direction, blurriness, all this kind of thing. So the idea behind it was if you this multitask thing, if you if you train a network to do multiple tasks, your individual task actually improves. So you could basically see that, you know, having a network also trained on depth perception actually does help in your segmentation, for example. Now that was known. That actually was one of our colleagues even here at EPFL did that work about a couple of years ago. And we now put the attention, a transformer, well, still transformer, but an attention head on top of it, and we could even improve their results, and actually quite significantly. So I agree with you that the attention models is actually something very much to look forward to. Now, the other thing we're actually right now doing, and we haven't really published too much about it because the results, well, this is actually also a PhD student who works on this other one, is we're doing deep learning on comics. Now you could say, why comics? Well, but Maximilian, this is actually now a project together with the University of Lausanne. They have a specialist in comics. And one of the things is it's actually all these deep learning models that I presented do not work for comics. And it's interesting why, and that's, it was my hypothesis anyway, they won't work, but actually they really do not. So, well, mostly they do not work. And the reason for it is the following, right? I mean, a comic is not like an image, right? Even though a comic has actually relatively sparse information, right? You have a few lines, and we fill in that the rest of the information, right? It's us who basically know exactly, okay, this is, you know, or we have a figure leaning forwards and a couple lines in the back, and that we can see that this, you know, figure is running. I mean, we can fill in this information. Well, a network, especially a convolutional network, needs information to process. If it's just blank, it doesn't know what to do with it. And so it's the domain of comics is so much different than the domain of images that many of them don't work. Now, but now you cannot train a deep network on comics because there just aren't enough. Because every person who drew a comic has a different style. And these sorry, these are not even comparable. And so you need to find a way of actually doing some transfer learning to make this work on information, on relatively sparse information. And so we're making a little bit of progress, and we're making lots of progress on just regular machine learning, but we're making it's a very, very difficult thing. It's also a very interesting thing because of this, but it's also very difficult. And then also, by the way, you know, think about comics. It's not just the spatial information, it's also the temporal information, right? If you take a video, you have so much redundancy in the information. Like if you take a photo, you have so much redundancy in the spatial information. In a comic, you have one panel next to the other, and that sometimes is just a second apart, but then the next panel is 3 hours later. And so you're missing spatially and temporally lots of information. But the very interesting thing is we can do it, right? We as humans, with no problems reading those comics and learning from them. But we don't have the machine vision system yet that actually deals with this sparse information. And that's why they were telling me still that, you know, we call them neural networks, but they're not, you know, they have some, you know, correlation with how our brain works or our neurons connect, but they're certainly not how our brain works. Which tells me again, it's not artificial intelligence, it's just machine learning. So to make the circle, to close the circle.
Nice. Thank you very much. I have questions, but Mila, you haven't said anything.
Yeah, thank you very much for your brilliant talk. And it's kind of like fantastic how you are kind of like covering so vast and kind of like interesting areas that, you know, this field is kind of like developing into different areas. I'm myself cultural historian, and I have been mostly working with text. Now I'm moving on to looking at like historical videos or historical like newsreels. So I'm kind of like getting into this field. But like now that you have kind of like painted out this kind of interesting and very quick developments in visual computing and how it is possible to do kind of like different kinds of analysis and also generate images. So it's kind of like also moving into different directions. So I'm just kind of like really curious to know, what do you think is the most interesting and challenging next step here in visual computing in the future? If you think about this fast development that has been taking place, and maybe add in kind of like these discussions that we have already had concerning the ecological kind of like problems and also social problems that are interlinked here. So what do you see? What is the most exciting and maybe biggest challenge that you see that we should somehow try to address next?
Curation of all that data. How do you, you know, and here specifically, you know, you as a historian, think of what you're having, what you're still having, and what you're not having, right, of all the information. So, you know, in a very simple, and curation is not that simple, but in a very simple way, of all the things being, you know, either photographed or created, you know, what's its meaning? Should it be kept or should it be thrown away? And this is actually one of the things, you know, the old digital archiving is not going to go away, right? If somebody is not going to take care of that data, then the next time the computer's thrown away or the next time the phone's changing, that data is being lost, right? There's no Facebook or Instagram does not guarantee you that they keep your data. So what's meaningful? You know, in the 1.5 trillion photos taken in 2022, what's meaningful? I mean, this idea of and I truly believe that kind of like the curation of this data, the kind of like the thinking of it, and because the curation of the data, you know, curation of the data has a technical aspect of it, but they can only be solved if the sociological or historical aspect is solved, right? What is, you know, are these pictures that I'm generating with my GAN meaningful? Nah. But, you know, on the other hand, I can use them to actually create a fake poster, right? Where I have all these people cheering and selling my baby product or whatever I do. You know, I mean, there's all these kind of things. So what is, you know, what's even meaningful, or is nothing even meaningful, right? To be able to throw, you know, go into the digital death door. Yes, go ahead.
So sorry, just to ask, so with the curation, do you mean like somehow understanding the meaning
the
within
worth
the pictures?
Exactly. I think understanding the worth of the picture, because that once you understand, or not the monetary worth, but just the importance maybe, right? What is the importance of the picture? And that of course depends on what's depicted. And that's where technology can help you. The technology can help you say what's depicted, but it cannot help you say if this picture is important or not. Does that make sense?
I'm not sure actually, because as a historian, I think that it's very difficult. It's actually impossible to say which photograph is meaningful, worth preserving and which one is not. Especially as a kind of like cultural historian, I'm kind of like particularly interested in, like, you know, even like I have been sometimes dreaming of possibility to excavate some trash from, you know, that somebody has in the past, for instance, has thought that this is total crap, we don't need this. So even that could be very interesting for me, because of course that tells quite a lot about that person and the thinking if something is categorized as trash, for instance. But this is I think this is really interesting.
Well, the thing is I think you're correct, but the difficulties there is that in today's day and age, trash is gone forever because trash is not visible, right? That's why I said, you know, if you give your phone to recycle, you're going to give your computer to recycle, it's going to be gone, right? Same kind of the, you know, the server. So you're correct, but the trash used to be something physical you could go through. Now it just doesn't exist anymore.
But it does
but
have
now,
effects, right? So
exactly.
So I think one of the key issues is that you know, we lost life from the Cambrian explosion, but there's fossil. And so in the same way, we may have lost Yahoo 360 for those of us who are old enough. But you know, there is still effects of that, which you can see. I don't know, just go to Reddit Place and you will see residues of Yahoo 360 if you know where to look. It's crazy. And so there's fossil, and probably that also exists in real life, like as physically. And so what I would like to sort of close this discussion with, like, bringing these feeds together. So what we just talked about, the thermodynamics of computation, that this is like so incredibly expensive what we're doing and wasteful and probably not sustainable, while at the same time we're engaging in producing something. Like, let me pick the example of your movie recommendation system of like how to do movies. So this is very much bounding the system, right? At some point, there is no surprise left. It's like everything will be like, that's my worst nightmare. Everything other than like having a fish allergy and a nut allergy and a cheese allergy. Like, the worst nightmare is everything will be like a 1980s radio station run by fascists. So basically everything is predictable. Everybody can only behave like you behaved last Tuesday or last Tuesday, and there's no surprise. And so the antidote to that is, ironically, a situation where nothing was preserved. Like, you can go down to the beach here in Tallinn, crack open an Ordovician rock, which is just a random rock laying around, and there will be some cephalopod from 400 million years ago. It's crazy. And so you look at that, and it's ultimately profound, it's surprising, it's new, it tells you a story, you could stare at it for 3 hours, and it's completely not a 1980s radio station. So the key question is, will machine learning get to a point where it doesn't have that bounding effect? And so maybe, let me make it more precise. Every new generation, GPT-2, GPT-3, all these transformer models, where you can prompt and then you get something back. But people are super fascinated on the web that, like, how awesome this is what you get out. One of the major depressing factors is that what you get out is ultimately very, 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 very bounded. And you can actually totally see, okay, this is 2016, this is 2013, this is 2022. And when you ask a number of really simple strategic questions, like my favorite one is like pink noise. And as a prompt, you get back something pink and nothing that has to do with pink noise. Right? And so how do we deal with that? Like, how can we use that in really good ways to enrich humanities and not to sort of like capture humanity, survey humanity, and produce lots of cultural product, which is just like all the other cultural product we already have.
I mean, that is a fundamental question. It's actually a fundamental question we all work on. This is actually, where in this whole distribution of data, machine learning system, it can be sound or text or whatever it is bounded by what it saw, right? Similar to the experiences that we've made. Now you take one new example and you want to know how far away is this from this distribution we talked about, right? For these bounds. And we cannot solve this. We don't know. Because if we could solve this, then we wouldn't have the problem with the bias in the data sets anymore. We wouldn't have the problem anymore with it stopping us. We wouldn't have the problem anymore that the machine learning system gives one output with some confidence, but could be totally wrong, but it still gives us that output, right? Because then the machine learning system would say, oh, I've never seen you before. Don't trust me. And the thing is, once we get there, then we have artificial intelligence, because that's how we work, right? We're so good at this. We see something going like, oh, no idea how this works. Never seen this before. I need to learn. We can do this at 100%. Are we sure we want our machines to be able to do that at 100%? Because then what we then have is truly intelligence, right?
Maybe not.
And I'm kind of happy to have human intelligence right now still topping machine intelligence. Having said that, these kind of like self-learning systems are being done, right? They're being done in one narrow application, but they're of course being done. You know, can a system self-learn by new data?
Mm-hmm.
And we are very good self-learners, right? But I'm a bit, well, we're going to get there, right? Somebody's going to be that brilliant and figure out how, you know, and again, in mathematical terms, you call it how out of distribution a sample is going to be. Do we really want that? I mean, it's a little bit the holy grail, because then everything you just said will be totally doable, right? And I personally, I personally like to know I'm still smarter than a machine. I'm not faster. I see less. That's what a machine vision system sees much more than I do. I see much less of it, but at least I'm still better to say, yeah, okay, I trust this output because I know I train on this. So no, here, that's something else, right?
Thank you very much.
It's a little provocative as an answer, but it's kind of where I'm seeing it going. Mm-hmm.
Yes, let's hope we stay on top.
Yeah, exactly. Because, you know, before we talk about artificial intelligence, I mean, the question back here is, what is human intelligence? What makes us intelligent or not? And I think it makes the thing that makes us intelligent is that we can take an unseen situation and know how to react. And this is exactly what a machine learning system at this point in time lacks.
Yes, time is up, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So this was a very, very nice and inspiring conversation, and I hope this continues. So I'm gonna switch off the recording. Zoom applause for Sabine Süsstrunk. This was CUDAN.
Thank you for the invitation. I enjoyed that very much, right? And sorry again for the problems with Keynote in the beginning.
No worries. I need to do one thing I always do at the end, which is say what's next. And actually next week, we're gonna meet Johan Lind et al. So a whole crowd from the Center for Cultural Evolution at Stockholm University, which is one of the largest crowds of people who focus only on that topic in Sweden, which is one of our lab encounters. That is not one talk, but like plenty of talks, basically. Yes, so, and with that, I do switch off the recording. Bye-bye.